New Thought Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, and it's just afternoon Mountain Time, top of the hour wherever you are, and my name is Tracy Brown. I'm so glad to be able to spend a little bit of time with you today talking about poetry, prayer, and spiritual practice. In this show, in case this is your first time finding us, we really focus on how to apply spiritual practice in your life. Like, what spiritual principles do you believe? Do you understand them? And are you doing things that help you live those spiritual principles and beliefs in your life every day? And one of the reasons poetry is featured is because my experience over the last 35 or 40 years is that a lot of people are inspired by poetry, but don't think about it as part of their spiritual practice. And a lot of people write poetry, but they also don't think of that as being a part of their spiritual practice. And I wanted to make sure that I was constantly reminded of the importance of poetry in my own spiritual practice. The reason that prayer is featured is because prayer is a technology or a practice that crosses many, many, many different religious paths and spiritual paths. And there's more than one way to integrate prayer into your life. And so, again, selfishly, I wanted to make sure that every month I was doing something to remind myself what prayer is, how to use it, and learn how others use it. And then, of course, practice in poetry, prayer, and practice. And for practices, even though we can talk about all different kinds of spiritual practices, the ones that seem to come up the most in this show are the practices that maybe you've created for yourself that are a little bit different, or they're not the practices that everybody thinks about all the time. To join me in that conversation, I often have featured guests, and today is one of those days where I am so delighted to introduce to some of you and to share with others of you the wisdom and the practice, the experience of applying spiritual practice based on her many, many years of being a licensed spiritual coach and practitioner of religious science, as well as just, you live long enough, you just begin to know what works. So my guest today is Suzanne Massey. Welcome, Suzanne.
Hello.
And let's see, I'm going to tell you 5 things about Suzanne, and then I'm going to invite her to add whatever else she would like you to know about her. So, number 1, I already mentioned that Suzanne is a licensed practitioner of religious science, and we can ask her to explain what that is, because some of you may not know. Number 2, as a practitioner, she is also a trained coach, spiritual coach. Number 3, she lives in Northern California, not in Oakland, but near Oakland, and is an active member and leader at East Bay Church of Religious Science, a member of the Centers for Spiritual Living. for, oh my goodness, she has a fiance and she has a new grandchild. And so family is important. And five, this is the person who introduced me to the poetry written by Tupac Shakur. I knew about Tupac Shakur as a rapper, and I knew he played with words, but I did not know that he had that a book of his poetry had been published after his death. And Kay Suzanne is the person who introduced me to that, and it has become a book that I refer to all the time. So those are my five things about Hey Suzanne. What else do you want people to know about you?
Well, thank you, Tracy. It is wonderful to be here. What I would like for people to know about me is first and foremost, as you mentioned, I am a religious science practitioner, which simply in my tradition means one that has been trained and is committed to use what we use a prayer technology of spiritual mind treatment, which is affirmative prayer, a 5-step affirmative prayer. Most importantly, though, it is a training and a commitment to be there to hold people that are going through possible challenges, various place of growth on their spiritual journey. I find this an honor and a privilege. That's the most prominent thing I love to share about myself. I've been a licensed religious science practitioner for 22 years, which in my tradition, I'm emeritus. And it has been my honor to hold people, people in wherever situation, place they find themselves to know the truth. That's the first and foremost about me. Second, as Tracy said, I am very much in love with and committed to my family. I do have a fiance, and we're hoping in 2024, after the pandemic is over completely, now that we can concretize our union. I also have a daughter and two nieces that I love dearly, and they each have, my daughter had her first child. My two nieces, who are like my daughters, one has one amazing son, and the other just had her second child. So there are lots of babies in my life. And babies to me exemplify also life and how joyous and beautiful life is. And then I guess another thing I'd love for people to know about me is I'm a writer. I'm a writer, I'm a speaker. I love to write poetry. I love to write. I feel that when I write, I connect with the creative mind of God in me. I also feel that that is my expression to remind me that I'm here and what a beautiful life this is. Even in those moments where it seems a little bit cloudy in the background, it's still a beautiful life. A
A little bit cloudy.
little bit
We
cloudy.
know the sun is still behind those clouds, but it's not always easy to remember that, right?
Yes.
Oh, well, I'm so happy that you said yes to coming and hanging out with me for a few minutes in the middle of the day, because there are so many places that we could go, right? We could talk about poetry, we can talk about prayer, we can talk about other spiritual practices. Do you have a preference of where you want to dive in first before, because I got three or four questions in my mind, but it's not important when I ask them.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much, Tracy. I believe I was really waking up this morning with prayer on my mind, thinking about prayer, how prayer has evolved my life, how it has transformed me from someone who stayed in places when I was younger before I open up to new thought. I stayed in places where fear, doubt would prevail my thought. Prayer, and particularly the technology of spiritual mind treatment, has transformed me from that place to the place where just recently, I'll give you an example. At the 4th of July, my fiance and I were sitting and listening to the fireworks and being lulled by them. And we heard this loud bang on the door, and it was a little startling. What is that? What's going on? And then a few minutes later, there was another bang. And then there was a softer knock. No one rang the doorbell. I was waiting for that. And I thought, and we kind of discussed it for a moment. And I said, let's have a meditation. Let's go into that place of quiet and stillness and let's pray. We did. And it mattered less what was happening out there. There wasn't any more knocks. And we went to bed knowing that we were in the divine knowingness, the truth of safety and peace and ease. Woke up the next day and there was another opportunity to enjoy life. Went outside, there was nothing out there but life.
I love that example. And it's a reminder for me of two things. One, it's so easy to jump into fear and then to let fear drive everything we do and we say. And it does take some discipline to breathe and then choose, right? Breathe and then choose. Okay, how do I respond? And then the other thing it reminds me of is that everything's not the emergency that we make it, because, right, there's a part of me that goes, well, I don't know, like there could be something really bad happening, right? Or outside, or why would somebody bang on the door? And, you know, surely they want to alert me. And even if I wasn't afraid, that I'd be curious. And it would feel urgent if I was hearing loud noises on my front porch or at my door. And so your example reminds me that everything doesn't have to be an emergency. Everything, even if I don't think I'm in danger, I don't have to respond as if I am.
Mm.
And it is that spiritual grounding. And then third, I'm laughing a little bit because I don't know, someone pounding on my door, I would probably go check it out. But when people just knock on my door or even ring the doorbell, if I'm not expecting someone, then I'm like, I didn't invite you to my house, so I must not need to talk to you. And I don't even go to the door. I mean, and that's been my for decades, that's been my practice. Now, I will admit, now I have a door camera. So I can look to see who's at the door without going to the door, but that's recent. So yeah, I love that going into meditation and then doing prayer. You've said, each time you said spiritual mind treatment, you said affirmative prayer. But I just am aware there may be people who are watching this who don't really know what you mean. Can you talk about that just a little?
Absolutely. Thank you. As I said, I prayer, I know it to be communion with the divine within me. As I said earlier, I am a religious science practitioner, and my form of prayer, the technology that I use, is a 5-step method, which is called spiritual mind treatment. Now, it begins with recognition, recognizing that God, by whatever name I choose to call God, for we know God is called by many names, whatever name I choose to call God is all there is. God is all there is. Next step is unification, where I am reminding myself, because many times we know that we know, but living in a human experience, we forget. This is the step where I remind myself that I am one with all that God is, all of the characteristics of God, the peace, the power, the prosperity, the joy, all of the characteristics of God. The next step is called realization, where I affirm my truth, whatever it is I desire in my human experience. It may be better health, it may be a greater abundance consciousness, it may be a new car. It may be a comfortable place to live. Whatever it is, I affirm the truth of that in my life. The next step is thanksgiving. I have recognized, I have unified with all that God is. I've recognized it, unified with it, realized and affirmed my truth. Then I give thanks. That's the next step, thanksgiving. I give thanks for the truth for which I have already declared, knowing that whatever I have spoken, it is my truth. It comes back to me, for it is the essence of who I am. Then the last step is release. I release the truths I've stated, declaring my perfect good. I release them into the immutable, the unchangeable law of God and spirit. This is important, very important to me, because to know that I affirm my truth, I give thanks, I let it go, I release it into that which has always been unchangeable, the law of God, the immutable law of God. I let it go, I let it be. This is the technology that has transformed my life. I'd like to share for a moment and expanding on that just a little bit. In Science of Mind textbook, which was written by Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, and this is for those in this philosophy, our Bible, one of our Bibles, but a Bible. There is something that Ernest Holmes states: this spirit flows through us. Whatever intelligence we have is this spirit in us. That prayer is its own answer. And that's how I see prayer. Prayer is its own answer. And then I also like to use a lot of new thought, the thought in new thought. And in the revealing word from the Charles Fillmore Reference Library,
Mhm.
the founder, one of the founders of Unity, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, he states prayer is a communion between God and man. Now, we know about the pronouns, but we also know that the wisdom of the ages has been written in many ways and many forms. So I'll just say that. He says it's communion between God and man. This communion takes place in the innermost part of man's being. It is the only way to cleanse and perfect the consciousness and thus permanently heal the body. And I'd like to say, when we're not just talking about the physical body, but the mental body, our body of affairs, those thoughts and those beliefs that have kind of ridden on the shoulder, on our shoulders for years, until one day we realize that doesn't really work for me anymore, because I'm not that. I'm this. I'm all this. I'm all God.
Woo.
And so I want to say too that, as I said earlier, prayer for me is, it's very personal. It's very important to me. It is poetry in motion. And that's where, to me, the connection, the collaboration of prayer and poetry comes in to play. It is poetry in motion. It could be an epic poem. Now, I grew up in the tradition of Seventh-day Adventist, and I've known people that could be on their knees and pray for probably an hour. And so it could be an epic poem. I've known people in my tradition of religious science that could pray for a while, and but it also can be the sweetest haiku. It is a way shore, and for me, it is the way in which I have grown through this journey called life. And I'd like to share my haiku, which is one of my favorite ways to express through poetry. And it's about prayer. It's about the technology that I have used in my life and has become the trajectory of my everyday.
Okay, bring
God,
it.
God, Spirit, divine within me, affirming all that you are, I am, nestling in this eternal truth. And so it is.
And so it is. Okay. So I just feel like I went to class, and I don't know, but hey, Shay, I'm so glad that you are with us this afternoon live. And I'm guessing you too feel like you just went to like the best class you've ever been to on prayer and spiritual mind treatment, especially, and what that is and why it is. And I think we forget, in our humanness of doing that, we forget what we're actually doing when we are praying. We are not begging, we are not beseeching, we are not apologizing. We are claiming that which must be delivered if the attributes and qualities of God's Spirit, the universe, are expressing themselves in our lives. And then, I feel like you're right. I feel like I agree with you. Not I feel like, I know I agree with you that it can be an epic poem, or it can be so powerful in the haiku. So I loved that what you wrote and what you shared was like captured it, just captured it all. Wow. Yeah, that's all I can say is wow. And what you shared about prayer and about spiritual mind treatment was so powerful that it made me forget the three questions I was going to ask you. So I'm just going to be completely honest. Like you just pulled me right in. It's like, okay, okay, come back, come back here. So, you mentioned Ernest Holmes and you mentioned the Science of Mind textbook. And one of the things I love about being on the New Thought Media Network is that we really get to engage with people who are from all the different New Thought traditions. And so I'm glad you also mentioned or referred to and quoted Charles Fillmore, because the wisdom in every one of the New Thought traditions, all of them have something really insightful to say about prayer, how to pray, or how to use prayer for healing or for manifestation, for expanding and evolving life. Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that, because one of my greatest teachers in the technology of prayer has been Emma Curtis Hopkins. And just just moving through her words and just being brought more into that, what the faith of prayer and the knowingness of prayer, and how it can truly change and expand your life, and do that which possibly everyone else is around you is saying that can't happen. But it's that knowingness and that fire. I learned the fire from Emma Curtis Hopkins and from so many new thought thinkers. And thank you
Emma,
for saying that.
Emma Curtis Hopkins, I remember the first time I really, really was reading things that she had written, and you just said, I think the fire. For me, it was like her absoluteness. Like, do you really believe this? If you really believe your spiritual beliefs, then you can speak your word with a conviction and a clarity that cannot be, like, there's no confusion, right? There's no confusion. If you know it, and if you believe it, this is what works and this is how it works. And there is no other option. We are not negotiating anything here. We are just like claiming it, demanding it, and expecting it. So then there's no issue about whether I can accept it, because I expect it, right? I expect the universe to work. And when you pray from that place, it definitely is affirming that God is working in your life, right? And so I love this. Thanks, Diva. Love affirmative prayers. Yes, when you are not begging and hoping and wishing or negotiating in your prayers, and you are simply affirming, or we are simply affirming the truth that must manifest, right? The glory of God must manifest in my life and in me. Wow. It's like, okay, there's no question. And Bonnie, yes, probably all of us who've read Emma Curtis Hopkins are like, my God, my good is my God, my God is my good. And shut up, right? Just like
Yes.
drop the mic. That's it. Thank you. So, so, Suzanne, you said you woke up this morning kind of with prayer on your mind, and when you said that, I immediately heard the song, right, the spiritual song in my head. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on spirit, right? So you're talking, and there's this beat happening in my body because my brain is here and woke up this morning with my mind stayed on spirit. Hallelujah. And a lot of times in New Thought, we interact with a lot of people who think the spirituals are like too earthy or too emotional, or they're not light and quiet. They like, you can't sing that song and not have some ooh, right?
Yes.
um and in New Thought in general, this is a generalization. This is a generalization, I know, not a stereotype, but a generalization. In New Thought, the majority of people in most New Thought communities, in many New Thought communities, is white. And so I want us, since we got two Black women here, I want us to have a little conversation about bridging the gap. Now, well, I won't put words in your mouth. I'll let you go wherever you want to go with that. How have you? And you mentioned you grew up Seventh Day Adventist, and so how have you? Number one, I'm assuming you agree there is a gap, so I shouldn't assume that. Have you seen, observed, or experienced a gap? And if so, how have you bridged it?
Mm. Thank you for that question, Tracy. Absolutely. I've experienced a gap, and how I feel that I've have bridged it is the recognition that, as I said in the beginning, God is all there is. God is all knowingness. God is serious. God is playful. God is joyful. God could express as God expresses as us in many ways. And as someone who wakes up this morning with my mind on spirit, and I feel that spirit, and I want to sing about it or shout about it or dance about it, I feel that because this is God expressing as me, I do just that. And I find that in the philosophy and science of mind, when I've visited a lot of various centers, that I find that everywhere I go, but I also recognize that it is expressed in a different way than I may express, or in the expressions that I embrace in my own spiritual community, which I belong to East Bay Church of Religious Science in Oakland. So I'm living in an area where there is a lot of diversity, and I belong to a community which is also diverse, and it has the cultural excellence there of various cultures, but primarily of the culture that I resonate most with as a Black woman. And it has been an amazing bridge, I feel. And I've done it over the years because I've been belonged to a community where it was diverse, but not primarily Black people. And I first came into a religious science community where maybe myself and my three girls were the Black people in the community. So it's been a wonderful journey to bridge that. And I also want to say, ironically enough, as I said, I grew up Seventh-day Adventist. Even though it was a Black church, a big Black church in San Francisco, uh, it the religion itself is, I always say, quite Presbyterian. So, people put their eyebrows up if someone came into the church with a drum or something. So it really was when I came into New Thought, and particularly was able to align with East Bay, where I said, I, I'm the spirit's coming out now. It's like I'm just going to sing and shout and do a little dancing in the aisles, because what I know that I know that I know, and what spirit has brought me through, and the technology of prayer, of treatment, spiritual mind treatment, how it has transformed my life. I just can't really be Presbyterian. I mean, and I love Presbyterians. Don't get me wrong. I love everyone, but I can't keep it contained. And I have to express it in the way that I can. And I feel when I do, many times, just the other day, Sunday, um, I felt as if I was exactly in the presence of my ancestors. I could feel the culture of my people. And I don't just mean my relatives I've known, but the people I haven't known, the people I haven't met. And I've always loved spirituals, which was a great expression, particularly during slavery and beyond. But now, when I can open up to other expressions of ways in which I express my joy and spirit, it just feels so connective to who I am. And I know I'm asking and I'm going on, but I feel that that's the way that I've bridged it. To bring it back to that question, is that I've recognized wherever I am, spirit, but I also have recognized and embraced the way I express spirit through me. And it is beautiful.
So, of course, and many people watching this also know that, my most recent book was Stained Glass Spirit, and it's all about creating spiritual communities where you have all different kinds of people, not just different based on race, right? But race and age and ethnicity, of course, and sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, disability, right? All the many ways that we are so different from one another. And so I know and notice when I visit different communities that there are different levels of comfort. There are also some assumptions and some stereotypes that all people who are Black in New Thought want to shout and sing and dance and all of that. And that's not true either, right? Because there is no monolithic way of being. But I want to help leaders in our New Thought communities create the kind of culture within the community where there is room for all these different expressions, and that there's diversity in the music that's played and in the people who speak and in the style of speaking. And so different, and we do in New Thought tend to attract people who come from all or many different spiritual or religious paths before. So, yes, we would have a gathering where you might have people who are used to the rituals and style of worship from the Catholic Church, and some from Pentecostal Church, and some from Southern Baptist, and some from National Baptist Convention, and the Methodists, and Buddhists, and Hinduism. It's like, if we say we are New Thought and we are applying these spiritual principles that are commonly woven through all of the metaphysical approaches to philosophy and religion, then we have to create communities where people can integrate all of their experiences with who they are now. So I of course, we didn't talk about this in advance because I didn't know it was even going to come to mind, that it is that, um, there is something there is something about bridging the gaps that are the result of our individual and collective upbringing or religious history. Yes.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that, because yes, I believe another commitment of mine to that is wherever I am, being who I am and bringing me there. I often like to say when I hear someone mention in whatever venue they may be in, it may be church, it could be in another venue, that there's something there that they cannot fully relate to, or that there's something they want to bring or they want there. And I always say, bring it. Bring it. Let it be known. I love this music, or I've enjoyed these speakers, but here's a suggestion of a speaker or someone who facilitates workshops, or here is a suggestion of a musical artist that would be great to share in the community. And I believe that's important in bringing and integrating. I love that you use that word, the cultures of everyone there, because I know, as I who I am, I show up everywhere. I'm a black woman. I'm a black woman who's a lesbian. And I love Audre Lorde, so I always love that she said that's who she was. That's who I am. So that's who I'm going to be no matter where I am. And if I want to be represented, I always feel I have to bring me. And then I have to be able to bring me to the conversation where there is discussion about what offerings are being brought where I am, because I'm there and I want to see me and I want to hear me.
Hmm. And for me, what you just reminded me of is when I go into different communities, even if I don't see someone who is a brown skinned woman, I want to see that this community is accustomed to different kinds of people showing up to explore spiritual principle and spiritual practice together. Because what that says to me is that, oh, there may not be somebody exactly that shares, two or three of the things that are visible about me, but this is a community where they are accustomed to navigating different preferences, different styles, different needs, and different expectations, so that I can show up as who I am. And in showing up as who I am, oh, I see they already have integrated signage for bathrooms that are gender neutral, or they have someone on the platform who is doing American Sign Language so people who are hard of hearing can hear, or can engage with the service, or there are people in the service who are different, from different generations, different age groups, are representing different gender identities. It's like, show me something, because I believe, and I mean, I believe this at the core of my very being. I believe that we all have been made by the same creator. And because of that, every one of us is, as Karen Drucker's song says, each one of us is the face of God. And so if I'm in a community and everybody is kind of doing the same thing or looks the same way or is from the same generation and they're really comfortable, then it's like, oh, they're not used to seeing the face of God look different from them or be different from them. So they may not be able to deal with the ways that I'm going to show up. So I'm going to sit very quietly and then mimic whatever I see them doing, whether that's authentic to me or not. Well, okay, 25 years ago, I might have done that. But it does. It's kind of like, oh. So if we believe everyone is the face of God and God created, these 8 billion people, let alone all the other forms of life, but 8 billion people to experience life in 8 billion plus ways, then I'm more uncomfortable when everybody is the same. I'm like, wait, I'm missing. Where's God as a 35-year-old? Oh, wait, where's God as someone who's 6'2"? Where is God who was born in a different country than I am and speaks a different, like 5 languages to my one? For me, while that may sound to some people like, Tracy, you're talking politics and all of that. No, to me, our spiritual principle says everyone is created uniquely. Everyone has been created by God. So living that in the world means I got to meet a lot of different kinds of people and get to know them and let them get to know me. For me, it is a spiritual conversation. I don't know. Maybe you ought to pray.
I totally no, I totally agree. And I do the same thing. And I'm like, where's everybody else? Where if I'm in a setting where there are a lot of people who are around my age, I give thanks for that. And then I think, where are some younger people or maybe some older people? And I mean, absolutely. I feel that, and I love that Karen Drucker song. Thank you because that is it. Everyone, we all are the face of God. And I see, and even when I move into my human self sometimes and forget, I'm reminded that every face I see is a face of God. And I want to see all those faces there. And because that makes me feel full of God. That
Mm.
makes me feel full of God.
I love that. Full of God, not full of myself, not full making myself comfortable, not full of protecting myself, full of the experience of God. Full of the experience of God. Bonnie's reminds us that we are still dealing with the consciousness of white superiority or white supremacy, and will only shed this in the immersion of the larger whole so that we don't other anyone or our ideas. Amen. And so it is. Ashe, abracadabra. Like, let's make this true. Right? That the larger whole, when we see that we really are all equal, the same, equal in the design and in the hierarchy of God, in which there is no hierarchy, right? And then we can let go of the hierarchy that humanity has created from this place of really fear. I'm afraid I won't get enough. I'm afraid I won't get what I want. So I have to make somebody else less than. That is not what we teach. That is not what any religion, any of the major religions teaches. And so it's fascinating that we can misuse or abuse our religious texts to create false hierarchy and false power. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. So true.
One of the things I love about this show, Poetry, Prayer, and Practice, is that I really never know where we're going. Like, if this is for those of you who might be watching live or the recording for the first time, none of the conversations I have with people are scripted. We don't meet before the meeting, and then say, okay, we're going to talk about these three things and like go get some quotes for that. Because for me, that would be, I might learn something, but it would be boring and it would make doing the show feel like it was a job or an assignment or an obligation. So all of the conversations are candid, and we may do a one sentence, like one sentence. Okay, well, let's talk about this. But most of the time, we don't even do that. We just say, we're going to show up and we're going to go where we are led to go under this broad umbrella of poetry as a spiritual practice, prayer as a spiritual practice, and life as a spiritual practice. So, thanks, Kay Suzanne, for jumping in the deep water with me and knowing and trusting that we would be just fine.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been fun
Well,
and uplifting.
well, I'm glad you said that because it feels like fun for me. It's like this is what makes, my Tuesday fun, because it does allow me to just kind of play with some ideas. So before we close out, we've got some thank yous. Thank you, Kay Suzanne. What a beautiful life it is indeed. Please bring Kay Suzanne back. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could convince her, but we'll see what we can do. And Bonnie, yes, leading with curiosity. That is exactly what this show does every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. And that encourages me, at least, to do that in my life throughout the week as well. So, Kay Suzanne, before we close out, any final, taking a deep breath, any final comment or anything you want to share before we close out?
There is. And another great teacher of mine in this journey of prayer is Dr. Howard Thurman. And I just want to read a couple of sentences. It's entitled The Inward Sea. Here is in every person an inward sea, and in that sea there is an island, and on that island there is an altar, and standing guard before that altar is the angel with the flaming sword. Nothing can get by that angel to be placed upon that altar unless it has the mark of your inner authority. Nothing passes the angel with the flaming sword to be placed upon your altar unless it be a part of the fluid area of your consent. This is your crucial link with the eternal. Nothing else I can say when Dr. Thurman speaks.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tracy.
me too. It's like Dr. Thurman gets to close out this show. Thank you so much, Kay Suzanne, for being with me today. And hey, everybody, I just want to remind you that not only do we have Kay Suzanne today, but then I will do everything I can to get her back in a few weeks. And And every Tuesday, there are different guests. So coming up next week is Reverend Cliff Rubin from CSL Edmonton, a New Thought musician and a very wise person, one of the people I most love talking about the application of what Ernest Holmes has written and how we integrate that in our individual lives and in our collective experience. And if, again, this is your first time, the archives of past shows is available to you. Just go to New Thought Media Network on either Facebook or on YouTube. And you can see not only past shows from this program, but you can see shows from all the other programming that is related to applying New Thought spirituality in your life. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm so glad that you joined us today. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week. Or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/newthoughtmedia network. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.